morning and welcome to Table Talk with Brenda Perryman. And we have an exciting show for you today. But first, I want to say congratulations to one of our Table Talk co-hosts, Mrs. Tiffany McEvans Dalla. Yesterday, she gave birth to a baby boy, and we're very excited about it. Congratulations, Tiffany and Elika. Now I'd like to introduce you to our co-hosts, and we have a guest co-host this morning that I'm very excited about, and I think you all will be too. And of course, we're excited about Chris. So,
Chris Summerall, Detroit firefighter for over 10 years and serving for the citizens of the city of Detroit.
I'm David Tarver, tech entrepreneur and faculty member at University of Michigan.
oh, faculty member at Michigan. A lot's been happening at Michigan lately, hasn't it?
Yes, it's been in the news quite a bit, and we've got a new president. I'm looking to see, what kinds of new initiatives are going to be taking place at Michigan. I happen to work in the entrepreneurship space there at University of Michigan, and it was just announced a couple of days ago that the person who is heading that whole effort on campus, special assistant to the provost, Thomas Zerbucken, is heading the entrepreneurship efforts at Michigan, and he's leaving. So
my.
we're going to have
A lot of changes.
some changes there. Yep.
Well, first and foremost, I want to remind my audience, and I talked to you about it this morning, and I had the film name a little wrong. It was an article in the middle. I said black and white. It means black or white. And this stars Kevin Costner and Octavia Spencer. And if you want a pass for two, call us here at 313-868-0351, 868-0342, or 868-4336 and get your pass. And I'm excited to see this film. And it's about mixed children, and many of us in our family have mixed children. I guess I'm talking about me, grandchildren. Huh? All right.
Beautiful they are.
Yeah, well, they're cute, but more or less they're drama. And their last name's Perryman. Okay. Now, on this day by Ken Coleman, we always read a passage for this every time, and I always find one that I could sing the theme to, and I have two. In 1976, on this day, January 23rd, Diana Ross's theme from Mahogany, do you know where you're going to? Do you know what? Anyway, is the nation's #1 pop song. The hit accompanies the 1975 Motown Paramount film Mahogany, where Ross plays a woman from humble beginnings in a gritty Chicago neighborhood who becomes a successful Roman fashion designer. It was kind of good. But I got one more for you. That's What Friends Are For. This was in 1986 by Dion and Friends. It's the nation's top pop song. Stevie Wonder shares lead vocals, and I think that Quincy Jones and or Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson kind of wrote this. That's what friends are for. Okay, I get my song out. Now I feel good. Now, quickly, the presidents, we're going to get right into this. We have someone who just called in for the passes. We'll announce their name a little. Oh, call back so we can get your name. Okay, President Obama had a very interesting State of the Union. His attitude was a little different, don't you think?
Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the soundbite that everyone has been clinging to is when he had mentioned that he's not running for office anymore, and there must have been some back and forth from those in attendance, maybe something as to how do you know, and he said I know because I won both of my elections. So he was pretty quick-witted, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that moment.
Right, because right before that, what had happened when he said, I'm not running again or something.
Right. This is my last election or something to that effect. But, I think President Obama, obviously he's a extremely intelligent person, and he'd been over that speech a number of times. I think he anticipated the kind of reaction he was going to get from the Republicans, and he was ready for it.
He was ready.
But the overall tone of the speech, I thought, was outstanding. I thought it was interesting when you look at the little trace that they had on the TV screen throughout that speech of what the approval of the speech was. I don't know if you saw that
Yeah.
version. It was up near 90%, Republicans and Democrats and independents, for most of the speech. So I thought the themes that he hit on were great, but more his tone was just confident. That's, we would have liked to have seen that for the past several years.
I guess he feels he doesn't have much to lose.
Exactly.
But he does have some things to lose because you got to be careful about the next administration if you wanted to stay in your party, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that while he definitely had some latitude there in his conversation, he still stayed on point and on focus. And I think that from what I've been hearing from most people, they're really excited with some of the initiatives that he talked about, most notably the one with making education more accessible toward the youth of this country, specifically community college. And he used a 4-letter word, but it's one of those good ones, and it's free. So, there was some backlash immediately after from, opposing sides or whatnot. But the idea of a concept of post-high school education from a community college level being free, that's really attractive.
And a lot of people, prominent people, have gone to community colleges. I remember Dennis Archer, he went to Highland Park Community College. There are people who started off at the community college and went on. Community college does not necessarily mean you don't have the aptitude for college.
Many times it's a financial circumstance that doesn't allow an individual to reach out to certain universities that they'd like to. Some of the more notable, the Michigans, the Michigan States, and they do have to at least initially start off at the Wayne County Community College, those more affordable, more accessible for them.
I know Dennis and so forth. Did you have a comment on that community college?
Well, I thought it was a great thing. The other thing that I thought about that, though, to be a little bit of a contrarian,
Okay.
is that I think that we have to do more in K to 12 to prepare people for jobs coming out of high school. There's no reason why, the technology has moved on. People have to know a lot more nowadays. So I think we need to look at that K to 12 curriculum as well and make sure that when people come out of high school, they're ready to do something productive.
And I agree with you. I think that from an employer's perspective, though, more employers they're looking at skill set, but they also want to see that documentation post-high school. So it's equally important to provide that. I think the president gave a statistic that said 2 out of every 3 positions in the next maybe 20 years are going to require some type of certification or post-high school education. And so an individual can be qualified for a job, as we know, K through 12 coming out, but if they don't have that degree, because in the requirements it'll say we want this degree required.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think we need to look at that and get away from that. And there are people who are getting certifications in high school, for Cisco technicians
Absolutely.
and all these kinds of things. So I think, we need to make that more available.
Right, and that's true. That's true. Remember, I taught high school for 39 years, and as I was leaving a few years ago, we had a robotics program that was second to none. Those kinds of technical industry jobs were very important. We also, of course, through the business department, had students working, having them trained and working in jobs, where they had to go off campus every day. They had a half day, but they had so much time to make it to work to understand what the real work world was about, because it's more than just training too. It's about punctuality. It's about
Learning about the world of work. I mean, when I was a high school student, which was a few years ago, I left school every day at 1 o'clock, had a job at Chevrolet Metal Fabricating in the engineering department. And that's what set me on my way a lot. And kids aren't getting as many of those opportunities, particularly kids in urban areas, as they need to get. In fact, there's a group of young people in Detroit who have a business model for facilitating more of that kind of thing between companies that provide internships and the kids that need them, and facilitating that with the schools. But again, I think there's a lot more we can do to prepare kids earlier, even if we certainly want them to go to junior college and to college, but the more you can get earlier, the better
Absolutely,
you're going to do.
absolutely. At one time now, at Southfield and at Highland Park, where I taught, they had an auto shop where students learned and were trained to work on cars.
A skill.
It was a definite skill and something you can work on for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Because how many people, cars are never going to be perfect.
Yeah. And I think that is something that there may be some happy middle ground somewhere in there where the community college, we've already seen the college and high school relationship in through charter schools. Maybe we can get a more of an infusion of those type of programs that are offered at a price. Community colleges, maybe high school students can now access those. Maybe that's part of the dialogue going forward. But definitely the K through 12, that's the foundation. I think that more practical emphasis on skills that actually pay bills, and I value all of the subjects that I took, from social studies to gym to history and everything. But when a child graduates high school, how have we equipped them if they have to go and provide for themselves at that moment?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the dialogue that we really need to kind of look at. And no doubt the president was thinking along those lines.
Right, and I want to speak once again to what David talked about. K through 12 education is so doggone important. And we have, my grandson I have one in 3rd grade, and he said he loves writing. I said, what are you writing about? I said, what do you write on paper? Oh, no, I write it on the computer. I said, computer, 3rd grade? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're doing these things now. A lot of schools are trying to prepare, but some of the charter schools I have issues with because of the high turnover of instructors. Mm-hmm. You could have this one teacher for a month and a half, and then they find a better job and they're gone, and then so forth and so on. And it's happening a lot, and I've known people at charter schools whose children go to charter schools who are very unhappy about that. So you need to think twice before you put a child in a charter school, some charter schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very concerned about the fragmentation of the resources. And I think that I would like to see, when I was in New Jersey, I served on a school board out there, and we were in a town where we had charter school, public school, parochial school, and private school. And it was a situation where there was a lot of conflict, but my feeling was, let's see what kinds of things, as a laboratory, come out of the charter school, and let's try to apply those things in the public school where it makes sense, and vice versa. But I just think we have too much fragmentation right now, too much proliferation of these different solutions, and we need to kind of get on the same page and formulate some solutions that work everywhere, whether it's a public school or private school or charter school.
And I think that some of that fragmentation comes because many individuals don't have the right motive when they're looking to become educators of our children. I know that there is a large part of the economy that is right there on education as far as charter schools, but an individual has to have the right motive. I listened to Brenda, and she was an educator, and she talks passionately about going above and beyond her duties as a teacher, even extending to be somewhat even of a mother at times, and she's still attached to, I would conservatively say, thousands of her former students now, and that's the attitude, that is the type of energy that is going to propel kids across the country. She'll get a call from California to New York to Florida, and these kids are doing well, and they remember the time that she took with them, and they're very appreciative, and they're successful in large part because of that.
Yeah.
We have Marcia on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. Enjoyed the show. I just like to say, Highland Park Community College was such an excellent college for myself and my friends. We went there, and, Highland Park College graduated the most black females at a community college. And it really did enrich our lives on all types of levels, the social level, psychology level, everything. It was a beautiful college. It really prepared us. We were just poor women on welfare. They were able to go. We were able to go. My friends, and there was 8 of us. We went to Wayne State University. We went from Highland Park College to Wayne State University, got their masters and everything. So 2 years of college enriches a child's life. And if you haven't been prepared in high school, that 2-year college can prepare you. And it's the most brilliant thing that he has come up with. In other countries, Germany, they pay for 2 years of college for people, have free college. Finland has free college. All of the European countries are now having colleges. It's free. That 2 year will enrich the people's lives. Plus, it's economic. You can get remove a lot of classes if you go to a 2-year college first. Your English, your science, some of your math classes you can learn. You don't have to pay for it at a 4-year college. So it's economical, and plus it enriches our lives. So it's the best thing I think that he has come up with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And also, he talked about child care, some kind of, not rebate, but child care is expensive. I remember I used to pay $75 a week 100 years ago when my children were small, but and then it went up to 100 and something. But now people are paying $300 a week.
You know, I'll touch on how expensive child care is. I've got a personal experience. While I don't have any children, my sister currently is a nurse in Las Vegas with her husband, and they're expecting their first child. Well, she's actually relocating back here to Michigan to be closer to family, to actually have some help, because the cost of child care, along with every other expense in a household, is just too much. So child care can really be a decision that can bring you all the way across the country. It's just that expensive. And so, it's something that definitely, as the president, I'm sure the hundreds of thousands of mothers, fathers out there who are burdened with, an expensive, and even it's not going to get any cheaper. It's not like gas. It's not going to fluctuate. It's only going to get more expensive.
Because you need it. David, do you have any points on that?
I have a 6-year-old, and I can attest to it's expensive. And fortunately, I can afford, what it takes to give her what she needs. But for a lot of people, it is a tremendous expense. I ran an after-school program, again, when I was out in New Jersey as a volunteer. And the amount, even though that was a publicly supported program, a not-for-profit program, the cost was still a major factor for those parents who were involved. So I think President Obama has just proposed increasing the child credit, the tax exemption for kids on income tax. I think it's a good move. I think anything we can do to get more resources into the middle class and lower economic classes, to redistribute. I know that's a bad word in some quarters, but to redistribute a lot of this wealth back to the middle class, back to people who are below the middle class, I think it's going to help the country overall. I think it helps the structure. Even the people at the top will do better as a result of that. We have a situation that's skewed now, and it hurts, up and down the scale.
And it makes you wonder, do they really care? Do these people who are against programs like this, or, the child care, what do you call it? The child care
Exemption.
Mm-hmm. Exemption, I'm sorry. Do they really care that the middle class do better?
I think that their perspective, or they just can be out of touch.
Well, and two, I think that there are many middle-class people who do vote for these people, so it seems like, in a way, they're voting against their own interests.
You know what I think we've had, coming off of the tough times, coming off of the recession, I think we're coming through a time where a lot of people are not doing as well as they feel they might do. And so I think there's a feeling in this country of us versus them kind of attitude. You see it in Obamacare. I think a lot of the opposition to Obamacare is, I don't want those people to get, subsidized health care. And even though it's something that, again, will help the country overall. As Obama indicated in his address, President Obama indicated that the health care cost inflation is at its lowest level in 50 years. We're having results, but still there's this feeling, I don't want those folks. So I think it's because some people, a lot of families have been going through tough times. And as those tough times get better, hopefully people will take on a different attitude about raising the prospects for everyone.
Well, the first thing, and we're going to move on, but the first thing that people think about when they listen to a speaker or something is, do I like them?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people who do not like our president, unfortunately. Now, Governor Snyder, speaking of not liking, some people don't like Governor Snyder. He said there's a time for all to swim in the river of opportunity. I said, who wrote this?
Tom Sawyer.
A preacher? No, a preacher wrote this. He had some highlights during his speech, but don't you notice that so many of the Republicans now act like they really care about the poor?
I think they said right before he had saw Selma, so he may have been inspired by Dr. Dr. King's eloquent speech. So I think that he's trying to portray a softer side, so Governor Softer, because there had been an us versus them statewide as far back as I can remember, and then as a business entity and what he represented, it was even more of a divide. And I think that this is an opportunity for him to try to spread his platform. Obviously, there's a presidential election coming up in a couple of years,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
everything is calculated in politics.
And he's been looked at.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the things he talked about was civil rights, and he called on the legislature to continue the debate on extending the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, but did not explicitly take a position on the issue. And that's the thing, he's never taken a position on that particular issue. He will not do it. He's scared to do that one.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of following what the party is doing across the country, too.
But I kind of separate Governor Snyder on one hand from the Republicans in general on the other hand, and I kind of like Governor Snyder from the standpoint that we're both entrepreneurs, so maybe there's some commonality there.
You went to
But
Michigan.
We went to Michigan. Actually, I served on the National Advisory Committee with him when he first came back to Michigan back in '97 in the College of Engineering. But Governor Snyder appears to me to be a smart person who wants to do the right thing. And I've compared him in the past with, on a national level, President Obama is a smart person who wants to do the right thing. And a lot of people oppose him because of who he is.
Right.
And I think in Michigan, some people oppose Snyder because of who he is. But I think they're both smart people who want to do the right thing.
And some of the things one thing that he did was this thing about Medicaid or something.
Mm-hmm. He didn't oppose the Medicaid expansion,
Right.
like so many other Republican governors did.
Right. And here, Bobby Jindal, he did
Right.
it. He has one of the poorest states in the country.
Exactly.
And I appreciated that. What I didn't appreciate was the fact some of the things never went up for discussions, like taxing my pension. It just, we're just going to
Yeah.
do it. I have asked legislators, I said, did you all talk about this? Did we get involved? I know that AARP and some other groups, they were involved in trying to protest it, but it went by so quickly. And that's the whole thing. Don't make anything look like a dictatorship, that you're just going to do this. But technical training, he talked about jobs. And right now, they say Michigan has the lowest job rate that it's had in 10 years. And I
Lowest unemployment rate, you mean?
unemployment.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think a lot of that is due nationally, too, to the president's
Oh, definitely.
initiative.
Well, if you think about what would this state look like if President Obama hadn't so strenuously supported the auto industry. It's hard for me to see, and my feeling has been for a while, we should have had a huge rally in this state. Thank you, President Obama, rally for what he did for this state. I live in Oakland County. What would Oakland County look like, if Chrysler had failed?
I know.
And I don't think that he gets the appreciation, the respect for that. I'm really sad about that, but we look a lot better than we otherwise
David,
would.
I remember when he came. My daughter works at JNAP, which is the Jeep plant, and when he came to the plant, there were so many guys saying, "I'm not going to watch this guy. I'm not going to." So they let them go home. I mean, how could you not? This man saved your job.
Yeah, that's called cutting off your nose to spite your face.
And that goes back again to what I said. If you don't like a person, you don't
Yep.
like a person.
Yep. Another way of saying it, if you don't like somebody, they can do no right. If you like somebody, they can do no wrong.
Absolutely.
I know. I don't drink the Kool-Aid of anybody. Totally.
Yeah,
You know.
definitely. You got
I mean, you really have to be, what do you call it?
a critical thinker.
A critical thinker, and you have to be objective.
Mm-hmm.
But so many people are subjective. And one thing Governor Snyder talked about were the roads. Let's talk to the roads.
It is. I'm very skeptical of this plan. The money has been there for years to maintain decent roads, just decent, not even great or excellent, decent roads. And I've driven all across the country, different countries, and by far, Michigan has the worst
bad.
roads outside of probably some community that is not even an urban area. And so when you're talking about jumping the sales tax from 6 to 7, while that looks very small, that's quite a bit of revenue coming into the
Percentage-wise, that's a
percent-
huge gain.
That's a
It's
huge,
a
huge. And so what I'd like to see is the responsibility with the 6% that we have now, instead of just because this is actually contrary to a Republican platform to
Yeah.
just raise the taxes to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, well, the other thing is, from an environmental standpoint, I drive an electric car because I'm concerned about the environment, not because it's such a green thing. I mean, it takes probably more carbon to produce that car than a standard car, but just to make the statement, we got to change the way we do things. A sales tax to fund this roads effort is regressive. It hits people at the lower end more than it hits people at the higher end because people at the lower end can't control their purchases. They have to purchase what they purchase. So now you've just increased their costs a lot. I would have rather have seen, frankly, a fuel tax increase to pay for the roads because that will encourage or discourage consumption, right? And that's what we need to be in the business of doing. I realize I'm probably in the 1% minority about that, but I just think that we've got to still consider the effect that we're having on the environment, and we've got to discourage consumption of fossil fuels and carbon in the air and all this sort of thing. And so I would like to see more put into mass transit. I'd like to see that M1 extended all the way up to Pontiac. Yeah. I'd like to see high-speed rail between Detroit and Ann Arbor and Chicago. I'd like to see the money go into things like that. I'd pay another % in sales tax gladly to do that kind of thing.
absolutely, and it was touched on in there, but it was a small amount.
Yeah, definitely.
That was. "Quote unquote" to be allocated for the mass transit, and we know that a lot of those funds are coming from private-public partnerships and whatnot. But I'm very skeptical of this proposed tax increase, to solve a problem that's been systemic in Michigan since I've been a kid. I mean, I can remember hitting my head on the roof of a car because a pothole, is just that big, and so.
Wow, you must have been in the back seat.
And I had a big head too, so I grew into it a little bit, so that didn't help either.
Well, one thing about it is he's talking about education. We have to have more skilled state. We go back to what David was talking about, what I've talked about, that K through 12 training. And Chris has talked about too. We got to get our kids up to speed. and you can't make people like school, but there are ways to get them really excited about it. I've
Yeah.
seen it happen. I've seen kids excited about math. I never got that, but I've seen kids get excited about it. Let's kind of move on because we have a lot of topics today. The prosecutor dropped appeals dropped charges for J. Ruth Campbell. Ruth Carter, she dropped some of the charges down to misdemeanors when he was trying to get right after he got out of jail, he tried to get his girlfriend's cell phone. He took her cell phone. He knocked her down in the hall. This was on tape and so forth. Do you think that he is not getting enough punishment or what?
Oh, well, I think that there's a mixture in here. I think that there's definitely an area where he's not really getting to see reality as what how he needs to hold himself accountable. But I also see a prosecutor in here that may be trying to make a name for themselves and going a little bit too far. So I see a mixture here, and we have to be mindful as well that these prosecutors have agendas as well, and they have career goals, and they're trying to make a name. And this is a hot case, and it's been a hot case in the state for a while. And this prosecutor may be trying to, make a name for themselves. And I think that, like the charge of the robbery unarmed, I don't think that him taking
That wasn't robbery.
that wasn't robbery. And so, there's a passage actually in the scriptures that say all things are lawful, but not all things are advantageous. So yeah, you may technically be able to charge this person with this, but is it really right? And I don't think that it's right. And I think that the judge was right to reduce or even decline those charges that were.
Thank you, Reverend.
So I haven't followed this case closely, I have to say. I've just heard about it. The only question I would ask is if you take similar cases from people who are not standout football players, compare that to how this is treated. If they're treated, I don't think he should be treated worse because he's an outstanding football player. I don't think he should be treated better because he's an outstanding football player. I don't know which is the case in this case, but I think he should be treated as any other person.
I think about the young Caucasian guy who killed people with his car because he was driving drunk. I forgot what state it was in, but he was
Texas, I think it was Texas.
He was very rich.
Yeah.
And they called it. There was a name they
It
called
was
about him.
something privilege.
Yeah. I mean, that was crazy.
I think that to touch on your point, I think that we do need to look at it from through those lenses. But I really think we need to look at it as far as why do we levy so heavily? If we have a common sense instance where maybe a boyfriend snatched the phone from his girlfriend because he's heated, right? Now, why would we charge that guy with unarmed robbery? So I think that it's a matter of looking at the other 99% of young football stars and say, well, really, should we?
Oh, we should look at the issue in general, definitely.
Because that can change the trajectory of a young person's life.
Definitely.
And so just the wording, and I think that sometimes we kind of get callous, and definitely I think prosecutors get callous with the impact that they have when they levy these charges and, how it's going to affect our community. So I think that this is an instance where these charges are unwarranted, or most of them are unwarranted and a little bit too heavy.
Okay, Dave Bing has said he will mentor the young man. A lot of people have talked about mentoring the young man. Now, next, we're getting into Nolan Finley's column and about tougher for blacks to join in the city's rebirth. Now, I'm going to talk to both of you are businessmen. I want to go to David first. What do you think?
Well, I tweeted after this. This is probably the first article I ever agreed with Nolan Finley on. I thought it was interesting that he would be the person who would point this up. But, again, I'm in the entrepreneurship ecosystem over at Michigan. I'm involved to some extent in Detroit. I'm involved in Flint. And it is distressing to see, all this activity and this rebirth particularly in the people who are involved in entrepreneurship, people who are helping entrepreneurs, people who want to invest in businesses. It's kind of a club, and because the wealth disparity between the white community and the black community is so large, most of the people who are in that club, the people who are in the investing class, the investment bankers, the angel investors, the venture capitalists, it's a very, very disproportionately white community. And so it is hard for a person of color to have credibility in that community, whether they are another potential investor, whether they are a person with a startup. And I think that it's something that, I started an organization last year called Urban Entrepreneurship Initiative,
Right.
specifically to counteract this and to help those people who are trying to formulate businesses in urban areas to solve problems that exist in urban areas profitably. And I don't just mean small, small charitable kinds of things. I'm talking about things like Uber.
Yes.
And so I think that there are a lot of things that we can do to facilitate more involvement in our urban areas on the part of the broader population, and there are things we can do in a university setting to connect those resources more closely with the urban centers who need the resources.
Okay, and there's a mention by this young man, Mr. Williams. He says small businesses just kind of disappeared in Detroit.
Well, and I agree. I think that some of the initiative, you have to search for it as an entrepreneur. We realize that the cards aren't stacked in our favor. But I also think when I think of an entrepreneur, I think of tradition and family, because most entrepreneurs, they have a family that has encouraged them. And I think that a lot of times in poorer or black communities, the focus is on just getting by, and a lot of times that's just getting a job. You don't have the ability to take those risks that entrepreneurs inherently have to take. And so the atmosphere to produce an entrepreneur from that is not as great as
Not
from,
conducive.
So I think that it needs to come from the K through 12. Why is it that the first time I had any type of dialogue with the SBA was on my own? How come they can't be involved in high school? How come we can't have some type of, because you hear kids, and no doubt you go and talk to kids at school, Brent, I know you're actively involved in it, and so you ask them, what do you want to do? And they say, I want to start my own business. Just almost inherently. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean? And I don't think that there's enough dialogue about really what it is to start a business, and what is a business? Do you know what a need is? How can you find a need? Can you find a market?
Definitely.
Different things like that.
And that's the kind of thing we're trying to address. And that's something that can be a real help in these communities, because you probably did, and I know I did. I had businesses growing up, right? You shovel snow, you fix bikes, you do all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So we were what we
Sell
called
lemonade.
kidpreneurs.
Yeah. Well, I created a magazine. I had some paper, white paper, just like this, and I pasted things on the pages, and I wrote things, little captures and bubbles across the head and everything, made little poems, and I sold them to my neighbors for 25 cents a
Yeah.
piece. I stapled them together. I mean, just little things, but something blows out that candle for a lot of students or a lot of young people. Also, yesterday, there was a young lady from here on Ellen's show, Asia Newsom. She started her own business. She started when she was 5. I think she's 11 now. Ellen ended up giving her a $10,000 check. The young lady sells candles.
Yeah.
I don't buy candles, but there are a lot around my house because my daughter does. And then she sold it to Ellen, $20, you think? But apparently the way she came across was such a great way. Did any of you see her?
Well, you know what? I followed that young girl for some time now, and while I'm not a big candle guy, I buy into her. I buy into her and her energy. And I've never met her personally, but just looking at her through the screen, I could actually feel the energy. I could actually feel her parents. Through pushing through her, because no doubt that there was some type of structure that encouraged her to be confident in yourself, to
Right.
approach these entities, and no doubt that's been why she's
And she
been
said she
successful.
wanted to be a lawyer, then mayor of Detroit,
president
and then
of the
president of
United
the
States.
United States.
Yeah.
And I think she meant that.
But you know what Nolan was talking about specifically, to get back to your original
Right. I
point,
was getting ready to
was,
get
you know,
back to
people who are in a substantive way participating in these businesses that are engaged in the revival of Detroit. And I think that there is a lack of representation there from, all communities. And I think it's something that, we need to be sensitive to and we need to address.
Well, David, how could people get in touch with your organization to find out something?
It's the website is urbanei.net. And, we had the big symposium over in Ann Arbor last October. We're going to do it again this fall on a larger scale.
Where? Ann Arbor?
We haven't decided yet. We may move it. We may do it in Detroit.
That would
There are a
be
lot of people
really
feel like it needs
nice.
it. But, one thing we try to do, we had a great representation from Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, over in Ann Arbor. What you don't get as much when you move it out of Ann Arbor, you don't get the academic crowd, right? And so, but we may move it because we're talking about urban entrepreneurship. So some people say it makes more sense to have it in an urban setting. So, we're
Good
looking
point.
at that.
But I also, to add one last point, I think that there needs to be an allocation in different state, municipal, and even federal projects for minority urban entrepreneurs. I think that until folks can find a way to create these opportunities, we have to allocate something for them, because if we don't, then we'll have a
Really?
situation. Yeah, I really do. I think that when you're talking about opportunity, and you're talking about a startup versus an established company, it's not. They're not playing on the same playing field. They're not equal, and so I think that you need to allocate a certain amount for individuals who are disadvantaged or who are starting up. And I mean, obviously, it is something that you would hope that they would propel or just use as a springboard.
Well,
but
let me
I don't-
ask you and ask David. Shouldn't come with a track record then if they're disadvantaged? I mean, I don't want to start off
Well, I'm not saying
a
disadvantaged.
business that I don't really know about, but I think it would be a great
Well,
business.
And I wouldn't even say disadvantage. I would say more so small. And being small is a disadvantage when you're talking about competitive bidding
Right,
and things like
right,
that.
that's
And
true.
so I think that there needs to be some type of earmark for those small entrepreneurs so that they aren't left, or that their seat isn't so far away from the podium that their voice doesn't get heard.
David, what do you think about that?
Those kinds of programs have existed, right,
Yeah.
since the 70s. And there have been a number of entrepreneurs, in the Detroit area in particular, who have taken advantage of those kinds of things, whether they be auto supplier, minority business development programs, or federal, or I don't know if the state can do that anymore with Proposal 2. But, that hasn't been my experience. I mean, my entrepreneurship experience, I'm a tech entrepreneur, and that kind of thing doesn't work in our space, because if you go to somebody and say, you have to buy my product, it's not the best one, but you have to buy it, they're going to react very negatively. And so that was never a factor in the kind of entrepreneurship that I do. But on the other hand, I do understand that, years ago when I first got into business, I had the idea to do these little automation computers for and to sell them to the auto company. And I had a friend working for Ford, so he brought me to town, and we went around to see some people at Ford. Nobody was interested in the least bit in seeing what I, had at that point. And it's hard to break in. It is definitely hard to break in for a new business. So I think that in terms of the auto suppliers, they have programs, and I think they're always looking for minority vendors. And it's benefited some folks. It's benefited a lot of women. It's benefited a lot of non-U.S. minorities.
Yes.
But in general, again, that's just not something that I have a lot of experience with.
Okay, we're going to move a little bit to sports in just a second. So wait a minute. I just thought, David, you've been working a lot down here in Detroit too, besides Ann Arbor, with the tech town and
Town,
so
yep.
forth. What do you think is going to happen? Do you have any ideas?
As far as
More businesses, entrepreneurs, or small businesses getting involved?
There's a lot happening. I'm impressed with the activity that's taking place. I'm impressed with the attitude downtown. There's a lot of people, moving into Detroit who want to do new kinds of businesses. So I think that the jury is out as in terms of how effective a lot of those businesses are going to be, but there's definitely a lot of stuff going on. I'd like to see more activity that's aimed at solving problems that people actually have in urban areas, because I think if we could develop an expertise in urban kinds of business models that we could export, around the country.
We have someone on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, who am I speaking with, please?
Speaking to Bill.
Hi, Bill.
Hello, Bill.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I see your guest here, one of the Mission Technology, and working for Chevrolet.
Well, no, he wasn't working for Chevrolet. No.
Okay.
Oh, in high school,
In high
I
school.
worked for Chevrolet
Okay.
as a co-op
Okay.
job. Yeah.
Yeah, we have about a minute.
All right. We should have General Motors go ahead and give back to the city right now an abandoned high school and a closed dealership to have our kids learning design from General Motors. They got everything else here, but they ain't giving nothing back. And the closed dealership. They have the money to go do something. General Motors is sitting real fine right now. And Detroit is sitting here like an adopted sister. Can anybody speak to that? How can we make them give back to the city?
If I could speak to it, thank you for your call too. I think that there's a fine line. If you make some or trying to force a hand in business, I think that you're treading on thin ice. And so I think that you have to show the value to a business model as to why it's valuable to invest into the youth of the city. And I think that there's a huge opportunity there. I think that those are some great ideas that you have that obviously need to be built out. But I think that the key word in there is make. And I think that as a business owner myself, I don't like that word when someone tries to make me do anything. Now, we can have a conversation and have dialogue as to why this is beneficial. They have budgets for pilots and programs like this. But
And they are doing some things.
they're doing some things like that. So, but I think that especially too, as a Detroit that is evolving and changing, we need to have a more of a conversational tone. And I think that we expect that from outside of Detroit, but I think that it's only right that it comes from the inside out instead of, yeah, we need this and we're going to do this. I think how can we accomplish is more of a tone that I think that would be conducive toward.
Absolutely.
things like
You
that.
can't, I'm going to make you. That's something, you're going to make me?
Well, I would say to that
Quickly,
too. We have a lot of people though who are not employed, and they're people at low skill levels. And I think that we have a lot of competitions, again, in the entrepreneurship area where we try to have somebody come with a business model for doing this or that. I think that one of the things that we can do to address this issue of raising the economic level and creating more job opportunities for people at the lower end is to focus on what kinds of manufacturing activity can we do, what kind of business models can we attract to the area, and recognize people and reward people for doing it that employ people at the lower end, because we're not going to change that situation overnight where all of a sudden, people who are low skilled are going to have a lot of education. We've got to provide some opportunities for people to have jobs right now. And I think that we don't give enough attention to that in terms of whether it's General Motors or some new business that is able to do that.
Right. Well, we just have a couple of minutes. We want to talk about Deflategate. The New England Patriots won that game. That was an exciting game.
That was a beatdown.
It was a
I mean, it's like they were getting beat and then they just came back fighting.
Oh no, you were talking about Seattle versus
Seattle.
Green Bay.
Yeah,
Now
that was
probably one
that
of the
was-
best games that I've
that
ever
was
witnessed.
outstanding.
And I had even went online, I think on social media, and I said, it kind of looks like as if Russell Wilson has taken a dive, because this guy, we all know him to be a phenomenal quarterback, and he
that's
really
true.
was
I
he
was
was like
talking-
0 for 9 with 3 interceptions, something unbelievable. But back to this Deflategate
They said they would have won with
with
any kind
they
of ball.
probably-
I tweeted that New England would have won if they were playing with a pork chop.
Yeah. I definitely agree. However, I do feel that the NFL it needs to be careful how it handles this. This is a storied franchise, New England, that's owned by one of America's families, the Kraft families, and it's probably the golden boy of quarterbacks, Tom Brady.
Right.
So we've seen how they've handled situations with. Not Tom Brady. Let's say that the black guys from the inner cities who aren't necessarily on the cover of GQ and aren't married to supermodels.
Giselle Bunkin.
Yeah, and so we've got a situation now that while many of us agree that it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game, it's still illegal. It's still.
But look, there's a big difference between a football being a little bit deflated and knocking somebody out in an elevator. I'm not putting those two things on the same scale at all.
Right.
Anyone in particular, because we have a host of individuals that we could talk about as far as how aggressively the NFL has actually imposed fines.
And handled and mishandled things.
Absolutely.
But we're talking about Deflategate. I think they don't want the problem because they have this Super Bowl coming up, and it's how they handle it, like you said.
It exactly is how they handle it. But again, I think that right is right. When you look at a football player like Sue will do something on the field, and not only will his action be taken into context, but his past, his history. Now, New England, unfortunately for them, has a history of being cheaters. So they've recorded.
Well, they have a history of stretching, their rules a little bit.
Now, it's
But
interesting how that
but
is worded when it's
Belichick-
New England versus Sue.
But Belichick said, you got to talk to Tom Brady about
Yeah,
that.
right.
Hey.
And Brady said, you got to talk to the equipment guys.
Wait a minute. That looked like an episode of the First 48. It was like, hey, it wasn't me. You need to talk to Tom Brady. So,
Well, Brady is a Michigan man. He would never do anything
Of course
untoward.
not,
Yeah.
Michigan man.
and I'm a huge fan of Brady. And I got a lot of respect for the program there in Michigan, although I think that, now we've got some better days ahead of us with the signing of Harbaugh. I really think that the NFL needs to show that it's fair and balanced because, it's not a big deal now when you jump on a black football player, right, for doing wrong. Rightfully so. Now, let's see how they handle a superstar, not just a white player, but a superstar.
But
Okay.
I'm not assuming that he did
Guys,
anything. What does he
Guys,
do?
we got to wrap.
are
We
you
got to
kidding me?
wrap. We got to wrap.
11 out of 12 footballs.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Oh, my gosh.
thank you for joining us today.
Michigan man.
We got to,
Wow.
they'll be fussing off stage too. Join us again next
Unbelievable.
week for Table Talk. And of course, 9 o'clock for the Brenda Perryman Show. I'll see you next week.